You name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to Nigel Farage, voted by you as the nation's best news presenter at the prestigious Trick Awards.
I'm Laurence Fox, but tonight I'm identifying as Martin Daubney. Well, it is Pride. Coming up on the show tonight, on Rwanda, the government says yay, but the lefty lawyers say nay. I'll be asking, who's really in charge of our country? Then, he was the Prince of Plants, and now he's the King of Climate Change. But should he do as his late mother Elizabeth did and keep his politics? Plus, I know, sad news, it's the end of the holy rainbow flag month of Pride. So I'm asking you to vote for your favourite or not Pride plonker. Head to GB News on Twitter to cast your vote, and we'll announce some of the funniest ones before the end of the show. And don't forget, as ever, you are my third panellist, so please send in your views on anything we're talking about tonight. gbviews@gbnews.com. Well, that's all coming up after the latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good evening to you. It's 8:01. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. The government's aiming to employ 300,000 new staff in England as part of its NHS workforce plan. More doctors, nurses and other healthcare workers will be trained, in addition to creating more university places for medical and nursing students, and there will also be greater emphasis on apprenticeships. The 15-year plan aims to reduce reliance on international recruitment and agency staff. The Prime Minister says it will focus on 3 key areas of reform.
This is the NHS's own plan, and the government is proud to back it. Funding the expansion of education and training for the first 5 years in full, with over £2.4 billion of additional investment. You can trust this government with the NHS. The plan rests on 3 principles: train, retain and reform.
Lord Goldsmith says he's happy to apologise for sharing his views on the Commons investigation into Boris Johnson's Partygate probe. The Tory peer has hit back after Rishi Sunak said he'd refused to apologise, saying his comments about the Privileges Committee were incompatible with his position as a minister. Well, Lord Goldsmith has now admitted he shouldn't have expressed his views publicly. British tourists are being warned about travelling to France with curfews and transport restrictions as a result of the widespread civil unrest. All large-scale events are being cancelled and armoured vehicles have been deployed to deal with the violent demonstrations, which are expected to continue for a fourth night. Protesters are demanding justice for a 17-year-old known as Nahel M, who was shot dead by police in a suburb of Paris on Tuesday. President Macron is considering imposing a state of emergency to crack down on rioting and looting. Bus and tram services have now been suspended nationwide. A court's been told the Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey is a sexual bully who delights in making others feel uncomfortable. On day one of his trial at Southwark Crown Court, prosecutors described the Hollywood star as a man who sexually assaults other men. He faces 12 charges of sex offences against 4 men, which allegedly took place between 2001 and 2013. He denies the charges against him. Energy bills are likely to remain high for the immediate future, despite a saving of £406 a year from tomorrow. A new price cap comes into effect this weekend, but bills will still be almost double the amount they were before the energy crisis began 2 years ago, to the tune of about £800. Ofgem says it has taken a range of steps to stabilise the market and to protect consumers. Millions more British people will be able to live and work in Australia when the age limit for working holiday visas is raised tomorrow. The extension from 30 to 35 means 16 million adults are now eligible. The visa duration will also be extended from 2 to 3 years without the need for consecutive stays or farm work. On TV, online, DAB and TuneIn Radio, this is GB News. But it's back to Martin.
In my home city of Nottingham this week, I took a moment to pay my respects to those who were stabbed to death on June the 13th, visiting the touching floral display in the Market Square. Looking up, I was struck by a giant banner that read "Nottingham celebrates Windrush 75. Last year, the council had similarly marked Black History Month, and for many months flew not a Union flag, but of course the ubiquitous flag of Ukraine. Currently at Nottingham Crown Court, a trans progress flag is flying for Pride Month. It's fashionable, almost compulsory these days to celebrate or even take the knee to minority groups, isn't it? But when it comes to celebrating white people, well, that would be racist. As they constantly tell us, it's impossible to be racist against white people. But that lie was shattered yesterday in a landmark ruling that found that the RAF had unlawfully discriminated against white male recruits in a bid to boost diversity by refusing to employ them. Well, thank God, such anti-white male racism didn't exist during the Battle of Britain. In our darkest hour, as RAF top brass quibbled over diversity quotas among Spitfire pilots, Britain would have been flattened by the Luftwaffe, and today we'd be ruled by fascists and all be speaking German. You sometimes wonder if the wokes wish we'd lost the war. Earlier this week, it emerged St Paul's Cathedral, yet the one that Hitler tried to bomb, had branded Winston Churchill a white supremacist and an unashamed imperialist on its website. We'll just wait until they find out about the guy Winnie beat. Britain is an 82% white majority nation, yet is governed by a political and media class that often seems to despise white people, and especially the white working classes, and particularly men. They're hated for their Brexit votes and held responsible for Britain's slave trade and empire, which they had little or no part in, other than fighting or dying in its armies or navies. White men forged this country. They toiled, they dug, they built our canals, our railways, our roads, every dry stone wall, and they rebuilt the country after 2 world wars. Of course, it wasn't just white folks, but they did most of the heavy lifting, and yet they get little of the credit. Their contribution has been airbrushed from history. A question for you. When 8.4 million women won the right to vote in 1918, how many men also got the right to vote? Well, you might answer, well, none. This was a victory for the suffragettes. This was a victory for women. But you'd be wrong, because 5.6 million men also got the vote, mainly working class men who didn't even own land, including almost every soldier who'd fought in the Great War. These men fought or died so their descendants could be called racists or even fascists by today's privileged classes, politicians, academics, the media and lovies like Gary Lineker. But let's look at the facts, and you could easily conclude that white lives don't matter to today's politicians. White working class boys have been the bottom of education for 20 plus years. They're the least likely demographic of all in Britain to attend university. Yet there is not a single initiative anywhere in the UK to even help them. And trust me, I know this. I got involved in politics and stared them in the eye to get this done. Yet to even suggest that these people need special help, well, that would be racist. They're also the most likely to go to jail, to be homeless and to commit suicide. When precisely does their white male privilege kick in? Now, this isn't a competition for victimhood. It's a cry for recognition and for equality, because every single person living in Britain today owes the white working classes a huge debt of gratitude. They died for this country. They built this country. So if we can have Black History Month and Pride, how about just every now and then we show some respect to those of a Caucasian persuasion too? Okay, thanks for that. So tonight I'm asking you, has pride lost its meaning? We're running a poll. Get involved. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.com. Okay, this week, the Court of Appeal dramatically ruled that the government's Rwanda plan was illegal, despite the High Court previously ruling that it was legal. With the battle set to rumble onto the Supreme Court and still without a single illegal immigrant being deported to Rwanda at a whopping cost of £169,000 each, I'm asking, who's really running the country? The politicians or the lawyers? Or what about us, the voters? Well, joining me to digest this and other stories today is former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and political commentator Suzanne Evans. Suzanne, let's start with you. It's Groundhog Day again, isn't it? Echoes of Brexit, the Lords, the High Court, the judges, doing their very best to derail democracy. Here we go again. The will of the people, 2016, take back control of our borders. They're not being allowed to do it. Nope. Will a single person ever be deported, or we just open borders Britain?
Well, no, Well, I'm not in the crystal ball tonight, but I think possibly this isn't the end. Obviously, the government's going to appeal to the Supreme Court. I think it's interesting that the judge's decision today was not unanimous. It was 2-1. So there was certainly one appeal court judge who thought that the government had a case to make. And obviously that's going to be important too, I think, in the Supreme Court trial. But I think Rishi Sunak summed it up perfectly for me today. He was doing the press conference about the NHS, but he was obviously asked about this. And he's absolutely right. He said, well, here we are. It's the criminal gangs, basically, who are running Britain's immigration system. It's not the government. It's not even the lawyers in that sense. It's the criminal gangs who have been using European human rights laws and universal human rights laws to try and stop this happening. The government's really got a problem here, though, because I think it's staked a lot on stopping those boats. It's one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges, which he's hoping to meet them all before the next general election comes around. And this is, I think, possibly going to be the most difficult one for him. So what I think the Tory party needs to do now, and I'm sure they'd recognise this, is we've got the illegal migration bill going through Parliament. That needs to become law. Unless that becomes law, I think the Tories are not going to stand a cat in hell's chance of winning the next election. Now, if Labour get in, of course, and that bill passes and becomes an act and gets royal assent and flights do start taking off to Rwanda, then Labour will probably come in and overturn it. But I think that illegal migration bill's got to be law. And to be honest, once that happens, the judges then can't overrule the will of Parliament. This is the slight issue here. It's not, I don't really see it as the lawyers and against the government or against the people. I think this is an issue of law, that law hasn't been passed yet by Parliament, and until that happens, the judges can overturn it.
OK, Scarlett, over to you. So who is in control of the country? The government, the voters who've repeatedly voted to take back control, or the lefty lawyers?
No, this isn't about lefty lawyers. This is about an independent judiciary. It's really, really important that we have judges who are not swayed by politics, right? And actually, if you look at the ruling, it was done on, there were 3 reasons that they found that it wasn't right. And they were worried that actually Rwanda was a country where there isn't an independent judiciary, where it is moved by politics, and that people who have a right to be refugees would not end up being refugees and would be deported instead. They also were worried that actually we would be breaking international law. Now, if you want the truth, I think the Supreme Court will find for the government, right? So this isn't about lefty lawyers. This is actually about the government not getting its ducks in a row before it does something. I can talk about, and I'm very happy to say, why I think it's a rubbish thing.
Well, tell us.
OK, so what we should be doing, we want to get rid of illegal immigration, we want to stop the boats, then actually why don't we get a decent asylum system where we send people back, where we're not spending £6 million a day on hotels, that actually we're sending people back instead of keeping them here.
But where to? How would you do that? Because the same judges that are stymieing this legislation getting through are also the same ones who are stopping flights, even leaving for places like Jamaica with flights loaded with murderers.
Because each time there is a reason. I mean, look, we do not live in a country of lefty judges. I wish it never happened. I can promise you that, honestly. I mean, but what we really need to do is we need to get an immigration system where you know within 6 weeks whether you're allowed to stay or whether you're not. And instead, it is literally years. And during those years, we pay for people to stay in hotels, right? And it is absolutely crazy. So instead of putting millions into Rwanda, a country, I have to say, that has been condemned by the EU and the US because it's having a proxy war next door in the Eastern Democratic Congo, right? There is a real problem with Rwanda. There's a problem about freedom of speech in Rwanda. But anyway, instead of doing that, why don't we solve the problem here? And that's what we need to do. And whether we send the odd person, and it's not going to be all of them, whether we send some flights to Rwanda or not, what we have to do is we have to look at the asylum system.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot I agree with you, actually, on this, Scarlett. I think just trying to brush this to one side by saying that it's lefty lawyers and the House of Lords blocking everything, I think what the government's actually saying is we're not smart enough or tough enough to govern properly. And that concerns me. You can't keep passing the buck. The government's made a decision for this policy. As I said, it's got the illegal migration bill going through Parliament. And let's just remind ourselves of that bill. It's going to change the law to make it unambiguously clear that if you enter the UK illegally, you will not be allowed to stay. Now, I think that is brilliant. I think most people who would agree with that, because why on earth should we have people coming here illegally, taking up those spaces in the hotels that Scarlett was talking about? And that actually means we then can't take in more genuine refugees who are genuinely fleeing war-torn countries.
Actually, if you're a refugee, you can't come here illegally. I mean, that's the whole point. Is if you are a refugee, you come here. And the problem is we don't have safe routes for refugees.
Well, that's not true. How many Ukrainian refugees have we taken?
They're not refugees. They've all been given. They're not refugees.
And Hong Kong and Afghanistan.
They've all been given visas. Afghanistan. We should hang our heads in shame about Afghanistan.
127,000 Afghans have come to the UK. 271 have gone to the 27 European member states. I think we've done more than our fair share when there's a genuine demand.
Can I say why we had to take the Afghans in? The reason is because actually Europe wasn't out there fighting. We were out there fighting. We had Afghani translators. We had people telling us we were training.
Agreed.
And these people, because of us, are in fear of their lives. When I was working in Afghanistan, all the Afghans who came into the British embassy, they had to have, they had to be
I think
tested.
the bottom line is we all screwed up on Afghanistan.
We certainly did.
The Americans screwed up on Afghanistan. We screwed up on Afghanistan. The whole thing is an absolute unmitigated disaster. But I'm sorry, this constant soundbite I hear from the left that there are no safe and legal routes for refugees. That is rubbish.
But doesn't a safe and legal route say to people traffickers, to smugglers, game the system in that way? If we can't stop illegals, which patently the government has failed to do at every turn, not a single person has been deported to Rwanda, how on earth is making it easier to get here going to possibly help?
I'm not trying to say make it easier to get here. What I'm trying to say is actually we've signed the Geneva Convention. There is a whole problem, and it's a worldwide problem. It's certainly a European problem about refugees, about people fleeing conflict, right? Real, serious refugees.
France isn't a war zone. Well, it is at the moment.
So let's say to France, you keep them. You keep them. You keep these people who really, really don't want to live here. These are people in the main, right, who come over. They've already crossed the Mediterranean. They are willing to risk their lives to get here.
Yeah,
most of them are actually the people who cross the Mediterranean. Most of them stay in Germany or France.
I think in your monologue there, you have practically admitted that you don't think that these men, and it is mostly men coming across, are genuine refugees. So that's a great one. Let's bank that one, and let's just.
I didn't.
I think you have by what you're saying. Normal refugee columns are women. They are children. They are people who are desperate. These people are not desperate. They have paid people, traffickers, £4,000 each
just a minute.
to come across the channel.
Most people fleeing for their lives are actually young men. You look at the people who are being arrested in Syria, in Somalia, in all those places. They are young men, right?
Well,
and the women who get there are really amazing.
They wouldn't be complaining about their hotels once we put them up in them.
Yeah, and I think that is the point. When we look at the metrics of the finance, for example, the Rwanda plan's been criticised because of its great cost, £169,000 per person to deport them, 63,000 more than keep them here. But of course, that means that if we carry on at current rates, but surely the whole point of the Rwanda plan is a deterrent.
Exactly.
And Migration Watch today announced a 37% downturn in arrivals would make this cost neutral Rwanda compared to where we currently are. So the financial criticisms aren't valid.
They don't add
in
up.
the long term, it would be cost effective to do this.
Absolutely, and it's got to be done. The boats have got to be stopped. Other countries have managed to do it. We must try and do it too, because I cannot think of anything more lacking in compassion than this people continuing to risk their lives making that crossing, people continuing to take places in our safe haven country from genuine people in need.
OK, Scarlett, final word to you. So you said you expect the government to be found in favour at the Supreme Court, but surely there'll be another appeal against that. And Baroness Chakrabarty, people like that, this will go all the way to the European Court of Human Rights. And at that point, they're buying for time, hoping for a Labour government. Will we ever be able to implement a single deportation to Rwanda?
I hope not. I hope instead we actually sort out our immigration system so that people are sent back and the refugees who are genuine refugees are kept here and are allowed to work. I mean, that's the whole point. What we do is with £6 million a day that we could save if we had a decent asylum system.
Sure, if they're allowed to work, that's a basic de facto open border.
I think it absolutely is. And
once you're a refugee, once you've got
come here without documentation, illegally, and you're allowed to work.
How can you get here legally if we don't have any routes on which you can flee Syria, flee Iran, flee Somalia, right? Flee the mess that we've made in Iraq.
Flee to France from
OK, that's great.
Safe
let the French deal with it.
Let
the French and the Germans who actually
that's not why they want to come here.
Well, of course it is.
That's not why they want to come here.
They come here often because they've got family or they speak English.
Well, I'm sorry, but, so have people who live here who need the services of the NHS, who need the services of the public sector, that we are now struggling. We're going to come on talking about the NHS in a minute. But, the fact is our population cannot continue to grow as exponentially as it has as a result of immigration. And these boats will keep coming. We will keep getting tens of thousands of people every year coming. We will have to home them. We will have to school their children, their families, whatever.
We are not.
Okay,
So what's wrong with a decent immigration system?
Scarlett,
what's
Suzanne,
wrong with a
Scarlett,
decent
Suzanne,
immigration system?
We haven't got one right
a
now. That's the
feisty
problem.
opening to the show. Wow, I hope you're keeping wide awake out there. We are certainly in the studio. Thank you for that, but stick around for the NHS debate. As we just said, you're watching and listening to GB News. Coming up, more panel discussion with Suzanne Evans and Scarlett Maguire, and we're asking if Rishi's NHS plan is a carbon copy of a Labour policy, and if it can work, if it's even good enough. Then, King Charles is giving net zero an almost royal decree, but should he be even get involved? This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm Laurence Fox, tonight identifying as Martin Daubney. And join me in the studio is former Labour advisor Scarlett Maguire and political commentator Suzanne Evans. Well, we got off with a great start on a Rwanda debate, and now let's move on to round two. Ding, ding. In a shock move to win...
agree.
In a shock move to win votes, the Tories have adopted a Labour Party policy and dragged it up to look like one of their own. A 15-year plan for the NHS, and now Labour are struggling to criticise it because it's exactly what they would have wanted to do. Well, you're watching and listening to GB News. Still to come, King Charles has been spotted with Sadiq Khan and a climate countdown clock, more like a doomsday clock if you ask me. The Prince of Plants is now the king of climate change, but should he be getting involved in politics? We're back in 3. That's the wrong bit of the auto cue. OK, let's go on again. Now, I don't know about you, but I only wanted 2... OK, we're doing the panel on the NHS. The auto queue's gone down. So let's start with you. No, let's start with you this time, Scarlett. So a 15-year...
This is what happens.
A 15-year plan.
Yep.
£2.4 billion has gone into the NHS. A very, very Labour Party-style policy. But is it enough? Is it too little, too late? Or is the ongoing NHS crisis, which has been around since I was a kid, just going to roll on forever?
OK, so I think there are two different parts to it. So this is a long-term plan, which if you look at it, isn't even going to be put into place until after the election. So clearly, I mean, basically what Rishi's saying is whoever you vote for, you're going to get this long-term plan. It's absolutely taken from Labour. They're not criticising it at all, actually. They're saying, this is great, this is what we want done. It's so important that we have it. 6 years ago, they promised us this. It's taken 6 years to come up with it, to come up with this plan. Meanwhile, Wes Streeting, came up with the plan in months. So actually, I'm not impressed. But the real problem with the NHS, I mean, obviously, in the long term, we certainly need a workforce. We certainly need many more doctors. We need more nurses. We need retention. But actually, it doesn't deal with, are you going to get treated for cancer in time? We're breaking the targets. Are we going to see our GP? I hear it's now 2 weeks. And for a lot of people, 2 weeks is too long. Every single target that they try to get it is being missed at the moment, right? And actually, what people want is they want a proper NHS now, not in 5 years' time.
Suzanne, isn't the problem, though, that this is just more of the same? It's more money into a leaky bucket. They're chucking endless money at it. Labour-style policy. Is this actually the way to do it, or do we need to look at a more serious root and branch reform of the entire NHS?
I think we absolutely do. I mean, the fact is, since the NHS was founded 75 years ago, and let's not forget, next week is its 75th birthday, so there'll be a lot of worship at the shrine of the NHS. I was very impressed with Wes Streeting, Labour MP today, saying, remember, the NHS is a service, not a shrine. I think we'd all do well to remember that next week. But here we are. Since it was founded 75 years ago, it has changed beyond belief. We are all living so much longer. Medical advances have come on in leaps and bounds. So diseases that we didn't even know existed 75 years ago can now be treated and cured. Massive demographic change. So here we are. It's about time, I think, we had a wholesale review of it, a royal commission even, to look at the NHS and say, what's working, what isn't, how does it need to change? The problem we have, as I've just alluded to, it's a sacred cow. No politician on any side of the House or in any political party actually wants to do that because they're terrified of a voter backlash. It's so much easier to behave like it's a cult that we must all worship. But we've got... But, Scarlett's also right. We've heard this all before. Jeremy Hunt, when he was Health Secretary, told Tory party conference back in 2016 that he wanted to create an extra 1,500 places in medical schools to make the NHS self-sufficient within 9 years in doctors. Well, that went well, didn't it? I mean, it didn't happen. I know we had COVID in the midst of it. That only made things worse. Of course, turning the NHS into a COVID-only service was going to cause the massive problems that we've got now. 7.4 million people on the NHS waiting list, a record high. Serious diseases such as cancers going undetected, people dying unnecessarily because it was shut down. An appalling thing to do. And frankly, I can't forgive anyone on either side of the House because they all wanted that.
Actually, can we quickly deal with the COVID thing? The reason, I mean, it wasn't COVID only. Hospitals, I mean, there were
people... Much it was.
But actually the reason was that people were dying. I mean, a friend of mine was told he could not, he had terminal cancer, he could not have any more chemotherapy because they didn't have enough ventilators for the people with COVID. I mean, remember, when Boris Johnson went into hospital, right? I mean, genuinely, he might have died. He was put on a ventilator. This was happening to tens of thousands
Absolutely,
of
but
people.
regular screening programmes don't need ventilators.
No, and that...
GP services
and you're completely right, Suzanne.
They shut the GP surgeries, they shut all the routine stuff,
they were
they
crazy.
shut day patients, they shut outpatients. It was a disaster.
Can we get back onto this debate? I know the COVID debate is fascinating and one that will roll on for years. We're having a proper inquiry, but on this specific plan to improve things.
Was that the NHS was not fit for purpose then.
Yeah,
That's what it showed.
And we're suffering the consequences of that
Yes.
every single day. Record backlogs, as you said, are because of the lockdown, really, not because of underfunding. But what I want to get from you is there any other solution allowed to the NHS other than saying, let's pump endless billions of pounds into it? What about Tony Blair, your old mate? He had very clever ideas on the NHS about part private, part public. What about the idea of incentivising wealthier people to go private to lessen the burden, so those needier of a public-provided NI service can get the bed space and the operations they need?
Martin,
would you like that?
This is exactly what happens now. Is that everybody knows? So my brother just had a motorbike accident yesterday. Amazingly, a ambulance was going past minutes later, so he did get taken to hospital. He knows that if they only pinned his hip instead of giving him a new one tomorrow morning, as they will, that then he'd have 18 months at least to wait for it. And what happens is, I mean, a lot of people I know go private because they can't wait. There's nothing new about that. That's been going on for absolutely decades, that the rich... Because if you go private, you get treated faster. There's no question about it. It's not, oh, I've got a lot of money, so I'll pay for it. It's, I've got a lot of money, so I want it in 2 weeks' time.
The whole ethos of the Labour Party seems to make the people who have private healthcare and send their kids to private school to pay more. So actually, it's going to make things worse. So I think Labour policy is completely wrong.
I don't think Labour's doing anything about private healthcare. I mean, what they know is that people go private. I mean, masses of people go private because they have no choice. And the people who I feel really sorry for are the masses of people who are called skivers, who are sort of lots of people in their 40s and 50s who cannot work, who are waiting for operations and getting worse and don't have the money to go private. Part
of the problem, though, Suzanne, is that people are having to go private because they're trying to short-circuit these massive backlogs that were caused by lockdowns. I've had friends who have been for cancer screenings and they've been tested positive for cancer, missed because of lockdown. So to say that it's a political issue, I think is missing the point, because everybody played along with lockdowns. Everybody caused this. Nobody sort of questioned those. Well, I mean, in terms of the main political parties in power at the time.
Yes,
So what I want to get to the root of, is this just another sticking plaster? And what about procurement? What about diversity officers? What about climate change roles? What about getting back to basics and streamlining, trimming the fat and making it about patient care, not virtue signalling?
I totally agree. I mean, I think it's the Taxpayers Alliance has identified something like 13,000 staff in sort of so-called non-jobs within the NHS that are costing a fortune, you know, play and communication workers, art curators, carbon managers, this kind of thing. And I was disappointed that part of this seems to be just pumping more money into the NHS. I was particularly concerned too when Rishi Sunak was talking about improving pensions as a way to try and retain NHS staff. I mean, NHS staff already get 14.3% on top of their salary, whereas the average in the private sector is only 3% up.
OK. Scarlett, final...
It's an endless money pit, and that's got to stop.
Scarlett, final word to you. The Tories have stolen Labour's clothing today. How do you feel about that?
I think it's great, because it was a really good policy and now we know it's going to be enacted. But I think we're going to get in there anyway. And because it's not going to happen before the election. Just if you look at the small print, nothing is happening before the election.
Rishi seemed to be very downbeat about the whole thing. He didn't seem to have any passion in it, as far as I can see. I think he knows he's not going to perhaps be around to enact it.
I think he needs a bit of a holiday himself. Scarlett Maguire, it's always a pleasure. And Susan Evans, thank you very much. Very feisty debate. Thanks for joining us on the Laurence Fox Show tonight. OK, you're watching and listening to GB News. Still to come, King Charles has been spotted with Sadiq Khan at a climate countdown clock. The Prince of Plants is now the king of climate change, but should he even be getting involved in politics? We're back in 3.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back to the show. Now, I don't know about you, but I only wanted 2 things from King Charles: to keep his nose out of politics and to stop banging on about climate change like Greta Thunberg in a crown. Well, this week, he failed spectacularly at both when he appeared with London Mayor Sadiq Khan to launch a climate clock, which looks to me a lot like a countdown to Armageddon. So tonight, I'm asking the big question: should Chaz butt out of politics? And anyway, why should we even listen to his doomsday warnings? Well, join me now to talk about the King's responsibilities and the monarchy is royal commentator, the legendary Michael Cole. Michael, it's always a pleasure to see your face, a face I grew up with as a boy. I've worshipped your voice for many years. Can we start with the basics? What is the actual protocol in royalty getting involved in domestic British politics?
Well, good evening, Martin. Thank you for that very kind and generous introduction. You'd be the first person to agree with me that every important question is at root political, and if you delve a little bit deeper, it then becomes theological. So anything that the King says and does is open to being parsed politically. The position is quite clear that in fact, he doesn't need to do anything because he has something that you and I don't have. He has the royal prerogative. And what is the royal prerogative? The royal prerogative is the right, his right, to be informed by the government of the day through the Prime Minister, to be informed, to be able to encourage, and also, importantly, to be able to warn. And the King is able to exercise that unique right at the Tuesday night meeting when the Prime Minister, to use the correct term, has an audience of the monarch. So the King can say what he wants to say politically in the complete privacy of his study or any other room at Buckingham Palace or wherever to the Prime Minister of the day. Now, the important thing about all of this is that he was asked before he became king whether he would continue to lobby to ministers and make speeches after he succeeded his mother. And he said, of course not. He said, I'm not that stupid. And he isn't that stupid. And he should be well advised, and you're quite right, he should be well advised by his courtiers to keep his nose out of party politics. There is no need for him to do so. And if he was very unwise, he would do it. And I don't think he is, as he said, not that stupid. It would be the wrong thing to do. It would be against our famously unwritten constitution, and it's unhelpful.
Now, Michael, there have been incidents before of royals getting involved in politics. Meghan Markle, of course, encouraged people in America to vote Democrat. Prince William asked Welsh sheep farmers if they were concerned about Brexit, and even the Queen herself in 2003 encouraged people to vote. But there's something different, I think, about this incident, Michael, and that is we are in a real live electoral cycle. The London mayoralty is coming up in less than 10 months. Sadiq Khan is standing as a candidate. Climate change is central to his taxation policy. Climate change is pure politics. Do you think on this incident that King Charles has overstepped the mark?
That's an excellent point. I would just say that I think probably Meghan Markle is probably a semi-detached member of the royal family at the Californian branch at the moment. Now, you and I, because we've been taking note since we were quite small children, and you've just demonstrated that in your intro, we know what King's position is on climate change. It's been well advertised over many years. And of course, he sees himself as a pioneer, a voice in the wilderness when he was starting to talk about this. And a lot of people believe him, and a lot of people share his view, and some don't. And there are some very distinguished people who do believe that climate change and the concern about it is all a put-up job, a got-up job. So he should keep out of it. He should be very careful, particularly in election times, because broadcasters, and you're a very important one, we are all governed by the Representation of the People's Act, the RPA. So whenever we are in election mode, and we have to watch very, very carefully that what we say on air is impartial and cannot be misconstrued. Now, I'm pretty sure that the men who surround the King at Buckingham Palace will be giving him pretty good lectures about this. He shouldn't need them because he's taken the example of his mother. And the instances of the royal family getting in politics are few, and they're usually unhappy.
OK, Michael, we're going to have to leave it there. Prince Charles got a very big pair of ears, so I think you're right. Somebody has to have a word in one of them. Thank you for your time. Now, looking at Charles's obsession with climate, I'm now joined by meteorologist and author of Whether or Not, Jim Dale. Hello to you, Jim. So you're a climate doomster. You must be loving this climate change clock business. I mean, this is basically another countdown to Armageddon. Greta Thunberg told us that the world would cease to exist on June the 21st this year. That didn't happen. Now Prince Charles is saying it's 6 years and 24 days. King Charles, beg your pardon, 6 years and 24 days until doomsday. Do you think people like the King coming out with this, it falls on deaf ears? They're multi-millionaires living in castles. Why should ordinary people listen to their doom-laden messages?
Good evening, Martin. I'm not a doomster. I'm a realist as far as the climate's concerned. I've been working with this for 40-odd years. Just to talk about the Green King, King Charles, dubbed by myself as the Green King. But having said that, look, let's make something straight. Even without the political side of this, I think we all know, not as a king, but as a prince, and for many, many years, King Charles, as he is now, has had a passion for the environment and climate, and long before climate change was possibly an issue. So really, it's the other way around. The politics has come late, and King Charles, Prince Charles, as was well into this at the very beginning and understood it. And he does have a real concern with the climate. He's on side with that as far as most people are concerned, the vast majority. and therefore he's not necessarily shouting it for the rooftops, but showing that genuine concern. If we were having regard for the clock, I'm not sure that's necessarily the greatest idea. The Thunberg clock, I think, was something of a mystery. That I'm not even sure that was correct. It's been reported wrongly. But look, clocks, they have a knack of either being too slow, too fast, or not working at all. And I'm a firm believer that actually climate change is moving a lot faster than that particular clock will actually work and go forward. I think the 6.5 years he's got on that one. I'm not sure it's the right one.
Well, so you think 6.5 years is very conservative from the King's point of view. What, you think the world's going to end before that?
It's not a case of the world ending, and this is the doomsday sort of scenario that you're putting across, Martin. It's not coming from the climate side. It's coming from the denier side, talking about doomsday and all the rest of it. It's not that. It doesn't. Climate change doesn't mean the end of the world per se. It will come in terms of catastrophes in one way. Some parts of climate change will be a bonus. It will be a complete and utter mixture. But look, we're speaking on a day where I think when it's actually confirmed that Britain has just had its hottest June ever since records began 150 years ago, and it will be followed not just by Britain but by many other countries that have been seeing, and regions that have been seeing massively hot temperatures in the month of June. That's without El Nino kicking in at this moment in time. The Antarctic ice sheet has reached an all-time low. This is the sea ice I'm talking about. And sea temperatures around our shores in the Atlantic and certain parts of the Pacific, 5-6 degrees above what they should be.
OK, Jim Dale, thank you as ever for a balanced view. I don't know about you viewers out there, but since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I've been told the Earth is going to end. It was the ozone layer. When I was a boy, I was told there's going to be an ice age. Then we're all going to burn, and now even Jim's saying 6 years and 24 days is too long, with the king of climate change willing us towards doom. OK, next, Pride Month is finally over, but who vomited rainbows onto the most pointless branding this month? Coming up, the biggest Pride plonker, the finals. You don't want to miss the results. We're back in 3.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in My Big Opinion, my first on-air reaction to Nigel Farage having his bank account shut down. Britain is now facing an all-out war on free speech. In My Take at 10, BBC star Gary Lineker has called for renationalisation of water. I'll be dealing with this millionaire socialist in no uncertain terms. Also, is net zero an expensive waste of time? I'll be asking climate skeptic and international best-selling author Bjorn Lomborg, plus my top pundits and tomorrow's papers. We're live from 9.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends were like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Martin, the big green, my superstar panel that are already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, it's been a long, hot Pride Month, and we're finally limping our way towards the end. The rainbow flags will be packed away for another year, and corporations can go back to not giving a flying fig about your sexuality. Well, it's been a vintage year for LGBTQ plus virtue signalling, and not just putting up some tatty flags in a charity shop window. I'm talking about the full, deep-throated, let's alienate 98% of our consumer base by appearing inclusive. So let's take a rainbow-hued look at some of the Pride plonkers. Well, what was it with DIY shops and Pride this year? They went full village people on us. B&Q went full trans. Maybe they should be renamed LGBT and Q, B&Q. Even Screwfix got in on the game. Screwfix, stick to the screwing, boys. But the most ridiculous brand was Wix, whose CEO Fraser Longdon said bigoted shoppers concerned about trans rights were not welcome in his stalls, which resulted in a full-blown cancellation. Well done, consumers. Next, let's move on to Pride's plonker politicians. Well, Joe Biden banged on about Pride all month, but then he'd read anything that was put on all skew in front of him. Canada's Justin Trudeau took time out in Prague, of course, to visit Rainbow Street and virtue signal about his involvement with Pride. But your Pride plonker, the winner, is London's Sadiq Khan. He not only launched Pride buses and trains all aboard the trans train, but also a series of commemorative Pride plaques all across the capital, all at the taxpayer's expense. Well, no doubt you're delighted about that, but we aren't. Anyway, I've run out of time now. I'm handing straight over to Mark Dolan. Here he is. He's the king. Stick with him.
Great job, Martin. Love the show. We've got a busy 2 hours coming up. My reaction to Nigel Farage's cancellation by his bank. There is now a war on free speech. Also, can a biological man ever be called a mother? And Gary Lineker wants to nationalise water. Are you going to pay for it, Gary? Mark Dolan tonight. My big opinion is on its way.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bright and breezy kind of sums up the weekend. Many places a lot brighter than today. There will be some showers around, but most places will be dry for much of the weekend. Some windy conditions coming in thanks to this area of low pressure. The isobars squeezing together. Light winds initially over northern Scotland, but that's where the winds will really pick up during tomorrow evening. Back to this evening, quite a lot of rain around today. That is all tending to scoot out into the North Sea, but still, for most, it's a cloudy night, dank, drizzly nights, rain and drizzle on and off, and a fairly warm night as well. Again, temperatures not dropping below 15 or 16 in the